Welcome to Dinosaur George Kids, a show for anyone who loves dinosaurs. Dinosaur George has studied paleontology for over 50 years and has performed live to over 4 million students across the world. So sit back and enjoy today's show. Now, here's Dinosaur George.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Dinosaur George. How you doing out there, future paleontologists? Digging around for clues, I suspect? I hope so, anyway. Welcome to the show. This is episode number 101, 101th episode. 101th? Is that a word? Is oneth a word? You know, all of you parents that let your children listen to this podcast, I know you're thrilled when you hear me giving these great pieces of intellect. Because now your child's going to say, do you know today I listened to the 101th episode of Dinosaur George? The 101st episode would be a little more appropriate than the 101th. That's what it said on my paper, 101th. This is going to be an interesting podcast. It's going to be different. This one is on dino defense and protection. So rather than have a specific feature creature, we're going to talk about things in general. Now, this is going to be focused on herbivores. And if you all like this particular podcast, then I will do one on carnivores, where I'll talk about maybe hunting methods and those kind of things, okay? So this will be interesting. First of all, we now have 1,125,618 downloads of this podcast. That's amazing. That's more than 101th. 1,125,618 downloads. That's crazy. I'm heard in 182 countries around the world and in 16,225 cities. That's a lot. And that's because of you. You all tell your family and your friends, and you go to school and you share this with people. And that's what causes the podcast to grow. Now, for any of you that have an opportunity, if you like the podcast, I hope you will give it a good review. Reviews mean a lot more than you think, basically because what they do is they place you higher when somebody searches. Let's say somebody searches dinosaurs for young people. And in a search engine, my podcast will be rated a little bit higher because of good reviews. So if you like the show, I hope you'll consider leaving it a review. I got to give a couple of shout outs. This is not birthday shout outs. These are shout outs to people that I've interacted with or met. First of all, today, as a matter of fact, I don't know what today's date is, but it's something. What is today? Today is March the 30th. Today, I met Clark and Copeland, who came all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. I was so excited that my schedule allowed me to be there to meet them and their family. It was so neat meeting you guys. I'm glad I got to meet you. I know Clark likes Tyrannosaurus Rex, and Copeland, I think, like Velociraptor. But Copeland started getting interested, I think, in Utah Raptor. So anyway, it was nice meeting the family. It was nice meeting all of you. I hope that you enjoyed your visit to San Antonio. At least the weather wasn't too bad. And maybe one day I will see you back in Atlanta, Georgia. I got a phone call. Now, speaking of that, of my store, I got a phone call from such a nice lady who was asking what the chances would be if I would be at the store sometime in the next coming weeks or months. And in talking to her, she said that her son, Rock and Roar Ben, is a very big fan of the podcast. So I just wanted to give you a little shout out, Rock and Roar Ben. What a great name. I just wanted to give you a little shout out and say hi to you. Now, in the store, Griffin and his family came from all the way from Wisconsin. Now, my dad was from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, so they were sort of, I guess, Griffin, you and your family are sort of like family, right? They came into the museum while they were visiting San Antonio, but unfortunately, I wasn't there. But let me tell you what we do. If I am available, my staff will FaceTime, set up a FaceTime where no matter where I am, I can still say hello face to face anyway. So I was able to talk to Griffin and his family, and I hope you guys enjoyed your stay. Griffin, I'm sorry I didn't meet you in person, but I hope that the FaceTime video at least made it a special trip for you. Thank you so much for coming and visiting. Now, I did a series of talks out at the San Antonio Zoo. They had an Ice Age mammal exhibit, and they brought me in each day during spring break to do a talk. And I got to run into so many neat people. One was I met Kai. Now, Kai is the smartest kid. He and his family visited from Chicago. It was his mom and his dad. And it was a rainy day, so they moved my talk into a building. And there was not a lot of people there. So Kai kind of sort of got a private lesson, which was fun for me. It was neat. I got to show him a bunch of prehistoric mammals. So Kai, I wanted to give you a shout out and say hey to your mom and dad. And thank you, Mom and Dad, for coming from Chicago down there to get a chance for me to meet you. That was so nice of you. Now, also at the zoo, I met Jackson, CJ, and River, who came with their mom, who I saw out at the zoo. They got to come in and hear my show, and it was nice meeting all of you. It was too cool. Also, I met little Mia, or Maya. I can't remember. I think it's Mia how she pronounced it, but maybe it's Maya. I'm so terrible. But the thing I remember about her is she had a little toy triceratops, a little stuffed triceratops, and she named it Dinosaur George. I am so honored that a triceratops was named after me. You were so cute. It was nice seeing your mom, and it was so nice meeting you, sweetie. And I hope that you enjoyed yourself while you were there. And then finally, I met Gracie and Evie at the zoo. Now, Gracie, I think, is a T-Rex member. So it was nice meeting you guys out there. It was so much fun doing those shows. My travel schedule is so busy. I don't get a chance to do live shows like I used to. I used to do them all the time, but now I have a traveling museum, and so I travel pretty much all the time. So there's some shout outs to everybody out there. Now, speaking of shout outs, for all of you T-Rex members listening to this podcast, remember, one of the benefits of being a T-Rex member of the Patreon Club is you get a shout out during the month of your birthday. And so right now, if you are a T-Rex member, or if you'd like to become a T-Rex member, if you have a birthday in April, you need to, if you want to join and get a birthday shout out, you can. But if you are already a member and your birthday's in April, remember, go to your Patreon page. You'll see a message from us telling you to fill in your information. You give us your name, how old you're going to be, and what your date of birth is. But it's all on the thing, and you can add it to the form. So the April birthday shout-outs will come later. We don't do them at the very beginning of the month because we want to make sure to give people plenty of time. So I try to do them maybe by the second week of the month. So anyway, there's plenty of time. If you would like to become a T-Rex or a Raptor Club member or a Triceratops Club member of the Patreon Club, go to our website, dinosaurgeorge.com, and you can get the link there, and you can see the different levels and what they cost. They're very affordable. All right. Also, speaking about the store. Now, it is March 30th, 2024, in case you're hearing this podcast in the future. I'm a voice from the past. Ooh. That was supposed to be a ghost. I don't think it's a good ghost. You guys think it's a good ghost? Nobody thinks it's a good ghost. How rude. How rude is that nobody thinks I do a good ghost? I do a great ghost. At least I thought I did anyway. So anyway, speaking of that, the store, if you live in or around San Antonio, Texas, or if you are visiting San Antonio, Texas, on April the 20th, that's a Saturday, I will be at the museum from 10 till 5. For any of you that are new to the podcast, I have a museum and a store located in a place called Traders Village. It's this giant outdoor market, but we're inside of a building. I have a museum, but my museum has more stuff in it than most museums you'll get to visit. I've got the skull of Spinosaurus, Giganotosaurus, 3 Tyrannosaurus Rex skulls. I've got ceratopsians. I've got sauropods. I've got mammals. I've got the skeleton of a teenage Tyrannosaurus Rex named Tinker. I've got the whole skeleton of it. There is more in that museum than most big museums. So, and it's free. The museum is free. And then I have a store in there as well. So if any of you are visiting or if you're from the San Antonio, Texas area, on April the 20th, 2024, I will be there. You can go to our website, dinosaurgeorge.com, and on one of the links at the top, it says visit our museum. When you click on it, it will give you or your parents all of the details. All right. Normally, this is the part where we do what we call our feature creature.
It's time for our Feature Creature segment. If you would like to suggest a creature, go to the Dinosaur George Kids podcast page at dinosaurgeorge.com or post your suggestion on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group page. Now, here is your Feature Creature.
All right, so really, we don't have a creature to feature in this episode. This time, we're going to talk about dino defense and protections. That is horns, spikes, clubs, and armor. Again, we're focusing on the herbivores. There are carnivores that had some of these things, and again, maybe we'll talk about them in the future. But for now, I want to explain, because this can be confusing, right? What is the difference between a horn and a spike? We know what the difference is with a club, but what is body armor? So let's talk about those. Let's start with horns. Now, to be a horn, you need to be connected to the skull, okay? So a horn is connected to the skull. Most of the time, the horns point forward, like ceratopsians. But you have animals like pachycephalosaurs that have horns on the back of the skull pointing backwards. So a horn is always connected to the skull itself. So one thing about horns is, as a matter of fact, here in my studio, I actually have the horn of a triceratops. So I am going to try to post the video of this podcast on my YouTube page. If it works, I'll start doing that more often. So if you go to YouTube and search for Dinosaur George, you should see my page. I'm going to try to see if I can upload this to there. I'm not sure if I will or not. So if you go there and you don't see it, I'm sorry. But anyway, here in the studio, I've got some horns from a triceratops. Now, the main thing about horns is that they are always covered with a material called keratin. Keratin, that's what your fingernails are made of. Your fingernails are made of keratin. The horns on a cow are covered with keratin. So horns, and real quickly, I just want to cover this. There's a difference between horns and antlers, okay? Has nothing to do with dinosaurs. No dinosaurs had antlers. Antlers are something that grow and fall off year after year after year. Horns do not fall off. If they get broken, they don't grow back. So a deer has antlers, an elk has antlers, but animals that do not lose them, like antelope, they don't lose them. They have horns. Now, again, that's a side note, just so that you know. So the reason why we know that they were covered in keratin, see, the keratin decomposes when the animal dies. There's no evidence of it after we find the skeleton. But what we do find is on horns, there are lines covering it. Those are where blood vessels go. A blood vessel is like a tube, like you have blood vessels all throughout your body. They're tubes that carry blood everywhere. So the horns were covered in those lines, and that is where the blood went that brought nutrition to grow the horn and to grow the nail covering. See, when you go to a museum and you see a dinosaur with horns, the horns never look very sharp. They weren't sharp. It was the keratin covering that was sharp. That's the part that made them sharp. If they broke the keratin covering, it would grow back. If they broke the keratin covering, it would grow back. But if they broke the horn, it would not grow back. And so, like your fingernails, you can break your fingernail and it grows back. But if your whole finger breaks off, then you're out of luck. It's not going to grow back. Wouldn't it be cool, though, if you could just grow extra fingers? Like if you grew like 5 or 6 extra fingers and somebody threw a football to you, you could catch it every single time. because you would have these alien hands. How did we get on the subject of alien hands? Would you people please keep me in line and what we're supposed to be doing? So, something about horns, they give away information. They tell you something. See, all animals have a way to survive within their environment. They are adapted or evolved ways to defend themselves against the enemies that they face. And by that means that, for instance, let's say sauropods are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, we see theropods. Sauropods are long necks. Theropods are meat eaters. We see theropods getting bigger and bigger to be able to take advantage. Each one of these animals is adapted to the other. One to survive, one to attack. And so when you look at the horns of an animal, it will tell you something. It will tell you where the attack will come from. Let me explain. If you have horns on the front pointing forward, that's an indication. The height of the horns is an indication of where the stomach region of the attacker is going to be. Because if you're shorter than your attacker, your horns don't do any good. So if you look at the horns of a Triceratops, you know what they line up with pretty well? They line up with the area that would be the stomach of Tyrannosaurus Rex, because that's its main predator. So by looking at Triceratops, you know two things. One, it's got protection. And two, that protection is designed against its bigger attacker. Those horns don't do Triceratops any good if raptors attack. But raptors are small and probably can't cut through the thick hide, so they don't have to worry about them. I once read an article written by a paleontologist who suggested that Triceratops' horns are not used as a weapon, that they're used for display. What display means is it's a way to attract attention, like you want a girlfriend or a boyfriend. The horns might be a way to say, look at me. Look how big I am. See how big my horns are? If my horns are big, that means I'm an adult. That means I've survived. That means I'm healthy. So, yes, they could be used for that. A lot of things have dual purposes. Like the antlers of a moose, the bigger they are, the more attractive they are to females, because it tells the female that's a healthy male. I want that one. I want to have a baby with that one because that one's healthy, which means my baby's probably going to be healthy. So, but the horns are also a weapon. If they're attacked by a bear, those antlers become a weapon. So there are dual purposes. But the idea that their horns were not weapons does not make any sense to me whatsoever. Animals do not grow things like horns and spikes and clubs and armor just to show off. They have a bigger purpose. It costs energy to grow things on your body. In other words, if I am going to grow 2 gigantic horns on my head, that takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of food, and it takes a lot of work for my body to make them. If they're only going to serve the purpose of showing off, why would they be solid bone? Couldn't they be, I don't know, cartilage? Couldn't that work just as well? But the fact that they are made of bone and the fact that they are covered by keratin tells us those are weapons. Those are defensive weapons. Weapons that are used to defend themselves or their babies from danger. So ceratopsians are immediately the dinosaur that comes to mind when you think of horns, right? Ceratopsians definitely have horns. There's a bunch of different kinds of ceratopsians. I mean, Pachyrhinosaurus doesn't have a horn necessarily, but it has a big thing on its nose that would still be a good weapon. And it was covered with keratin as well. So it could still be a weapon. It doesn't have to be sharp. Somebody said, well, how could Pachyrhinosaurus hurt you? Pachyrhinosaurus, I think, weighed 3 tons. That's like being run over by a truck. A truck doesn't have to have a skinny horn sticking out to be able to hurt you if it runs over you, right? So, ceratopsians immediately come to mind as dinosaurs who come to mind when we think of horns. Most of them have them. Very profound, very prolific horns, very effective. Some have big horns on their nose, which, by the way, those that have the horn on the nose, like Centrosaurus or Ionosaurus or Styracosaurus, those nose horns are perfectly suited for whoever's attacking them. Like if Albertosaurus were attacking a Styracosaurus, listen, that thing could put its head down, and Styracosaurus isn't a big sauropod. So it could absolutely stab a taller animal with that big nasal horn. So those are the dinosaurs we think of immediately when we think of horns, right? But Pachycephalosaurs have horns. Here in my studio, I happen to have the skull of a Draco Rex. Draco Rex is a Pachycephalosaur. It's got really large horns. Now, its horns are on the back of its skull, but because they're connected to the skull, they're still called horns because they are connected to the skull. It doesn't matter which direction they go. In fact, Ankylosaurus has horns, 2 of them by its cheek. They are spikes, but because they're connected to the skull, they're horns. They've got horns, and they have 2 kind of on the back of their skull as well. But Pachycephalosaurs have horns. This guy, Draco Rex, has horns everywhere. Horns on the end of his nose, little hornlets. What's a hornlet? What's the difference between a horn and a hornlet? A hornlet is usually a little cluster of horns, little horns. So we call them hornlets. Like there's a pig and then there's a piglet, meaning a little pig. There's a horn, there's a hornlet. That sounds like some sort of country song. I'll write the lyrics later. So horns tell you where the attack comes from. Like for instance, on Draco Rex and on Pachycephalosaurus and on Stygimoloch, the biggest horns are in the back. And that makes sense because these dinosaurs are probably going to run and the attack is going to come from behind. Something is going to launch itself onto the back to try to grab the neck, and those horns are waiting there. So horns can tell us where the attack is probably coming from. They can also be utilized as decoration to attract a mate or to scare away a rival. With moose, let me get back to moose. The big antlers on a moose, if you're a young male and you see a big male with bigger antlers than yours, that's nature's way of saying, hit the road, buddy, because they don't want to fight. They don't want to fight. I know in the movies we always show animals fighting. That happens very rarely. Usually there is intimidation to prevent a fight. I think dinosaurs did the same thing. I think when 2 big triceratops met, 2 big males or maybe female rivals, if one of them has bigger horns, the other one's probably going to back down because it's not going to risk being injured by a more powerful specimen than yourself. So the horns could be used for display. And they were probably used, they were, in my opinion, absolutely used as weapons. Here's one more thing I want to say about horns. I wish that more artists would make the horns on dinosaurs brightly colored. Now, because the horns are covered in keratin, that may not be possible because keratin usually is a neutral color. But I believe that if there was some way that there could be maybe there was skin covering them. I don't know. We've never found any evidence of that. But I would believe they would be brightly colored because color is important in the animal kingdom. It sends a message. It tells you, don't get near me. That's why coral snakes have bright red, black, and yellow. That's why red wasps are red. Those are warning colors. Poison arrow frogs are brightly colored. They're telling everybody, look, here I am. Don't mess with me. I believe that ceratopsians may have had brightly colored horns as a way to tell carnivores, you want a piece of me? You want a piece of me? Wait, how did Triceratops suddenly become from Brooklyn? Yo, you want a piece of me? I don't do a very good Brooklyn accent, but I think the horns should be brightly colored. Now let's move on to spikes, because horns and spikes are different. Spikes are always on the body. Not the skull, on the body. There's one exception to this rule, and that is Styracosaurus. Styracosaurus is a ceratopsian who has a horn on his nose, but because the ones on its frill are not the skull, they are called spikes. Spikes on the frill, horns on the skull. Now, spikes are always on the body. They're not on the skull. They're on the body. And you might say, well, isn't the skull part of the frill? No, technically it's not. It's not the same thing. I differentiate them. But they also have a keratin covering. They have a keratin covering. Again, that covering makes them sharp and makes them very good weapons. Now, dinosaurs or spikes, first one comes to mind, Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus, right? Those spikes on the tail. Great weapons. Very effective weapon. Stegosaurus's tail is a great defensive weapon that can be wielded from side to side, but it would be swung sideways and up. Sideways and up. It would be thrust into the stomach area or the hip of, let's say, Allosaurus or Torvosaurus or Saurophaganax. It's not moving from side to side because the spikes are up at an angle. It has to be swung out and up to be an effective weapon. Spikes are very effective, and spikes are always straight. Horns can be curved. Spikes are almost always straight. I can't think of a spike that's not. The reason for that is a spike, you don't want to stab the attacker and hold him close to you. You don't want a fish hook. You want to stab and get away. You want something that pokes a hole and goes. So they're always straight. I don't know of any spikes that are at least hooked towards the end. Some of them have a little curve to them, but they're always going to be designed to go into the attacker and come out very easily. You don't want to keep the attacker close to you. So we always think of Stegosaurus as having spikes. Now, Ankylosaurus also has spikes. Most of them are around the side of the body. The spikes are along the edge of the body. When you look at, oh my gosh, who is there? There's Edmontonia. Edmontonia. There's Euoplocephalus, Cycania. All of those ankylosaurs and nodosaurs that have spikes have big ones. Those spikes are very effective. Now, they are usually not pointing up because they have body armor on the back. That's protected. It is their sides that they want to protect, and especially from maybe medium to large raptors. Yeah, they can jump on their back and bite them all day long. Good luck. Let me know when you get tired. But the underbelly is usually the weak spot, and the spikes are there to prevent an attacker, or let's say Tarbosaurus. Let's say Tarbosaurus tries to get under a Cycania. Well, those spikes are going to stop it from trying to put its head down and get under and flip him over like a turtle. So those spikes are there. So we always think of ankylosaurs as having spikes. So remember, ankylosaurs have horns and spikes. It's pretty cool. Amargasaurus. Now, here is a sauropod. There's Amargasaurus and Dicryosaurus. I think that Cryosaurus also has spikes on their neck. Amargasaurus is not giant, but Amargasaurus's spikes, like the horns, they tell you something. They tell you which direction the attack is coming from. All of theirs point up. The attacker is taller than it is, so its weapons are pointing up to defend itself. If you are in a war and airplanes are coming for you, you point your weapons up. You don't point them at the ground because that's not where the attack is coming from. It's coming from above. So Amargasaurus's neck spikes are pointing up. So is Dicryosaurus's. And then, of course, it brings us to Styracosaurus. Again, technically, the frill is connected to the skull, but it is differentiated as not really part of the skull as far as how I think. Maybe some paleontologists call those horns. I call them spikes. I think most people call them spikes. The one on the nose is a horn, but the ones on the frill are spikes. The same would go with, who is there? Cosmoceratops. Cosmo has the little spikes. Even some Triceratops, some ceratopsians have those little spikes along the outer edge of the frill. So we refer to those as spikes. Then that moves us into clubs. Now, clubs are almost uniquely ankylosaur weapons, but there is a sauropod. Shunosaurus. There is Shunosaurus who has a tail club. That's a sauropod, a long-necked dinosaur with a tail club. That's pretty amazing. You know what I should have left in here is I should have also listed whips, because tails are very effective weapons too. Sauropods use their tail, ornithopods like hadrosaurs use their tails, Parasaurolophus, Edmontosaurus, they use their tails. I forgot to add tails in there. I should have added tails to this. I just did. What do you think of that? So tails are a good weapon, but imagine a tail of a sauropod having a ball on the end of it, a club. But when you think of clubs, obviously you're going to think about Ankylosaurus and Sicania and Minotaurosaurus and all those dinosaurs. Those clubs are effective. Now, what's really cool about their tail design is they are perfectly designed to swing that club. See, a dinosaur like, let's say, sauropods, their tails are sort of whip-like. Like they could kind of wiggle the whole tail. But Ankylosaurus cannot do that with its tail because the end of its tail is stiff. It's stiff. The base of the tail could be wiggled, but not the end of the tail. And that's an important feature because when it swings that tail and it uses that club, it wants to hit with tremendous force. If you swing a baseball bat and hit something, you hit with tremendous force. If you swing a wet noodle or a wet piece of spaghetti, it doesn't hurt because the spaghetti is limp and wiggly. You don't want wiggly. You want a baseball bat. So the next time your mom says she's making spaghetti and meatballs, tell her, could you make baseball bats and meat sauce? Because I would like to use a defensive weapon. Okay, I wouldn't do that. So clubs, and listen, clubs also have a keratin covering as well. They also have a keratin covering that could grow back. So the reason why all these things have keratin coverings is because they need them to be able to, they have to cover the bones because the bones have to have blood flowing to them. And that's brought by the different veins and arteries and all the other things within it. And so there has to be a covering. Those can't be exposed because if they were exposed and something bit them, they might bleed to death, right? So there has to be that nail covering. So even the club has that covering. And finally, we get to armor. What is body armor? Body armor is little pieces of bone that is not stuck to the skeleton, but it's kind of stuck in the skin. It's embedded in the skin. It's held in place by skin. They can actually move a little bit. Their real name is, well, we call them scutes or dermal plates. They are bone. They grow, but they grow in certain places on the body. An example would be, go online and Google Galapagos tortoise and see if you can zoom in on its legs. And you'll see these round, knobby pieces of armor that cover its legs. Those are dermal plates. Those are scutes. That's body armor. And it serves to be armor. Look at a Gila monster. That is a lizard that has body armor, dermal plates, the little scutes all over it. Well, Ankylosaurus has them. Notosauruses. There are some sauropods that have them. Stegosaurus has them on its throat. Yes, Stegosaurus has body armor on its throat. That's pretty remarkable when you stop and think about it. That's a pretty incredible thing. But it makes sense, especially if Stegosaurus has the ability to stand up on its back legs. Some paleontologists believe it can. I think it can. They could stand up on their back legs to get higher up in to reach more food. And that would expose its throat in an attack. Say something came in, something camouflage jumps out of nowhere, at least it's got some protection for the throat. Because most dinosaurs are going to go for the throat. Because if you go for the throat, it stops the animal from breathing and the animal dies and you're safe. You don't want to get into a stabbing match with a triceratops. You want to try to get to its throat if you can and try to kill it as quickly as possible for you to be able to not get hurt. So these dermal plates, the scutes, they are body armor and they cover the body in different spots. Carnotaurus has dermal scutes. Carnotaurus has body armor. We'll talk about him in a future podcast. But the dermal plates are there to prevent the teeth from getting through to a vital organ. Yes, a dinosaur can bite them. And yes, when the tooth is in a spot where there's not a scoot, it can punch a hole. But the scoots are going to stop the whole mouth from going in because somewhere one of them's going to stop a tooth. And you could break a tooth biting into those scoots. And some of those scoots might even have a sharp edge, giving them even more advantage. Scoots are usually found on the legs or on the back of the animal, because those are usually the most vulnerable spots where an attack is going to occur. So if we could travel back in time, you would see so many different herbivores who have so many varieties of weapons because they needed them. But each weapon is used for multiple purposes: to defend, to attract, or scare away. I believe they might have been brightly colored, if that would be possible. I don't know if it would be or not, but it would be interesting if there could be color on them. If there was, I think it would be brightly colored. The weapons tell you something about where the attack comes from. When you look at a dinosaur and its weapons are pointing up, that's a good indication that's where the attack comes from. For those of you that follow me on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group page, if you would like a project, here's what I would like for you to do. If you follow us, and following us on that page is free, and if this is the first time you're hearing this podcast, if you would like to join our group, I hope you do. We post all kinds of fun stuff. It is a family-safe place, by the way. My podcast is very family-friendly. Sometimes I use words to describe an animal killing another one. That can be a little traumatic, but I try to do it in a way that's not gory or anything like that. So if you follow us on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group page, I'd like for you to draw a picture of an herbivore that has some form of weapon, whether it's a club or armor or spikes or horn, and draw a predator that would be the one that the horns were intended for. So if you're going to draw a Margosaurus, you got to draw a carnivore taller. If you're going to draw Triceratops, then you want to draw a T-Rex about the same, where the horns would go into its stomach. But I'd like for you to kind of demonstrate how it could defend itself. Or if you don't want to draw, I would like for you to take your dinosaur toys and put predator against prey. Post your picture on the page. You can post pictures on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group page. Post a picture on there of how your animal is defending itself against a rival that its defenses would work very well on. All right, let me take a quick break to rest my voice. If you would like to become a member of the Patreon Club, there's 3 levels. The Triceratops level, which costs $1 a month. The Raptor level, which costs $5 a month. And the T-Rex member, which costs $10 a month. For the $1 a month, each month you get to join us on a Zoom lesson for 1 free lesson. There's 1 a month that you get for $1. Let me tell you something. When I used to do private lessons, those were $200 for a private lesson. You get to join one for $1 a month. That's a good deal. If you become a Raptor member, you get 2 live lessons a month, and you get a welcome gift of a Raptor replica claw that's mailed to you, regardless of where you live in the world. And if you could become a T-Rex member, then you get 2 live lessons. You get a Raptor claw replica and a T-Rex tooth replica, and you get the opportunity to have your name chosen to be interviewed on an upcoming podcast, and you get a birthday shout out. And you get to enter the Who Would Wins. Who Would Wins are only entered are provided by the T-Rex members. So here's some information about it.
Become a member of the Dinosaur George Patreon Club and join the fun. We offer different club levels, each with their own set of benefits. Private lessons, new discoveries, behind-the-scene access, and much more are all part of being a club member. Visit dinosaurgeorge.com and sign up today.
All right, let's ask a couple of questions or answer a couple.
Do you have any questions about dinosaurs? Just ask Dinosaur George. You can post your questions on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook page or click on the Dinosaur George podcast page at dinosaurgeorge.com. Questions are chosen at random, and you can submit as many as you want. And now, here's Dinosaur George.
All right. Let me read some of the questions that I've received from people. This is from Spino Baron. Spino Baron says, or Baron Raptor wants to know, which dinosaur was the last one to become extinct? This is a very good question. The trouble with fossil evidence is it's not exact. We have a lot of questions, a lot of things we don't know. Now, layers of dirt are like pages of a book, and each layer represents a different time. The layer that holds the last of the dinosaur bones, we know those were the last dinosaurs because there's none in the layers above it. We know that they died here. But the problem is there's no way of knowing which was the absolute last, because we would have to find it at the very, very top of that layer, and that layer can go for thousands of miles. We don't know if we've ever found it. So what I can tell you is T-Rex, Triceratops, Pachycephalosaurus, Edmontosaurus, a lot of those were the last kinds of dinosaurs, but there's no way to know for sure which would be the very last. Okay, this is from Indo Eli and Ezra Dactyl. If you directed Jurassic World, what hybrid dinosaur would you create after Indoraptor and Indominus? Wow. Who would I create? What would I create? I would... Carnivore? They've done carnivores. I would create a Triceratops and Kylosaurus mix. An armored Triceratops with a club. That would be unstoppable. I think that's what I would do. And then the other question was, what was the largest carnivore or carnivorous theropod ever discovered? Well, there's a lot of debate. What constitutes the biggest is the question. What's the largest? Is it length? Is it height? Is it weight? Spinosaurus appears to be the longest. If you don't count the sail, Giganotosaurus, Maposaurus, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Carcharodontosaurus are all taller than it is if you don't count the sail. I don't count the sail. I don't think that adds anything to the mass. But I think most scientists would tell you Spinosaurus is probably the representation of the largest. The most powerful remains Tyrannosaurus Rex. Okay, this is a question from Archie from Squamish, Canada. How much would a T-Rex eat? Hey, would it have to eat every day or one Triceratops or something per week? This is interesting. Estimating the size of the stomach can be difficult because we have limited evidence. So we don't know how big its stomach is really. And therefore, we would also have to calculate what kind of calories does it burn just by moving around. Was it active? Did it hunt all the time? Did it spend a lot of time sleeping? Was it like a lion where once they're hungry, they get up and go hunting? Or was it like a jaguar that just walks all day long looking for something? Those things would be unknown, so there's no way to know. But for the sake of your question, my guess would probably be they would probably need about 500 pounds of meat per sitting, which is about the size of half a cow. So one Triceratops might last them 5 days. They may stay by the body and just gorge themselves and then just sit there to defend it until they finally have eaten their share or the meat becomes so rotted they don't even want it anymore. That's a great question, but there's so many unknowns, it's impossible to answer that with any absolute authority. All right, this question comes from Silas Johnson, who lives in Davidson, North Carolina. Did Coelophysis hunt with its head and neck or arms and hands? Wow! All of them. I think they have a long, slender neck, which meant that they could jut their head forward very quickly, which is a great weapon for catching things like fish or insects or lizards or snakes that are quick. So they would get close and they have an S-shaped neck. And when they straighten that neck out, it comes flying forward, sort of like the way a crane or an egret hunts, neck shape of the S, and boom, fire it forward and grab. So they would have used that, but they also would have used their hands as a way to grab and hold prey as well. I think they would have used both of those. That's a very interesting question. That's a very good question, by the way. All right, Parkosaurus Rex would like to know, how big were the tickle chicken's claws? All right, what he's talking about is Therizinosaurus. I happen to have a Therizinosaurus claw in my office. This gives you an idea of the size. The claw is about 3.5 feet long, maybe 3 feet long. Now, remember, claws have the keratin covering. So if you go to a museum, I have a Therizinosaurus hand in my traveling museum, and those claws are big, but they would be much bigger when the animal was alive because the keratin covering would have made them longer and sharper. But I think about 3.5 feet long. Tickle chicken. What a great name. This is one from Daliosaurus. Did dinosaurs have homes like caves or things like that? What an interesting question again. And by the way, all of these questions are coming from Patreon Club members this time. I just chose Patreon Club members' questions. The small ones or any of them would take advantage of a cave. A cave is a great place to live because if you are attacked, the attack can only come from the front. So if you've got horns on your nose, cave is a good place to live. If you are an ankylosaurus, cave is a bad place to live because you can't yield your weapons because they're in the back. So animals like ceratopsians, if they found a cave big enough, I think they would stay in them. Little carnivores would definitely stay in them, I think. I think little herbivores would stay in them as well. They probably built nests, so they could probably stay in a nest as well. I think they lived in a variety, but the big ones were relegated to just sleeping in the forest or out in the open. They would be like animals in Africa today. They just sleep out in the open. Okay, Adisaurus Rex. What is Rhino Rex? Rhino Rex. You know what? Rex means king. Rhino means horn or nose. The nose king. So would that be a ceratopsian? I don't know. I wish I had time to read these in advance. I could have looked them up, but I don't know. That's a great question, though, little Addie. Okay, Maddox Mimas said, how did terror birds catch their prey? 2 ways. Their feet, their beak. Their feet would have been great ways to knock things down and hold them down. I think they would have done that. You look at secretary birds, you look at Seriamas, they use their foot to stomp and hold the prey down or disembowel it with their claws. Or they could just use their beak to grab them the way modern hawks and eagles and owls can use their beak to catch things as well. All right, Stella Gamersaurus says, what was the biggest sauropod? Boy, this is another one that is so difficult. This is another one that's a difficult question because we don't know if what we found is the biggest. We don't know if the biggest species has been found. We don't know when we find one. Is that an adult? Is that a full-grown adult? So right now, I think Patagotitan and Argentinosaurus are both 2 of the ones that are in the running for being the largest of that particular, the largest dinosaurs. That's who I believe that it was. Okay, let me see if we can go to do some Who Would Wins.
Who would win? What if 2 different prehistoric creatures fought? Who would win? T-Rex versus a giant wolf? Raptor versus terror bird? Spinosaurus versus Triceratops? You choose the animals, and Dinosaur George will size them up and pick a winner. Now, get ready. It's time to find out who would win.
All right, so to submit a Who Would Win, you have to be a T-Rex member of the Patreon Club to be able to submit a Who Would Win. So let me see if we've got any Who Would Wins. Here's a bunch of them. Okay, let's go. Wait, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. Wait for it. I'm looking through a bunch of them, past ones that I've just not ever had a chance to do. Here we go. Okay, this is interesting. This is from Russell Raptor. Megalodon versus 10 orcas. Who would win? The orcas. In fact, I believe it was orcas that caused the extinction of megalodons. That's what I believe. Here's why. Orcas are mammals. Megalodon is a fish. Shark. Fish brains are not big. Mammal brains are big. Mammals are more thinking animals. Fish are reactionary animals. They probably don't think about things the way a mammal thinks about things. So mammals are better suited for coordinated attack, right? Because they probably have better communication skills and they have a better way to work with each other. So an orca is not going to attack a megalodon. It's going to hunt the baby megalodons. There's all kind of videos on YouTube today of killer whales killing great white sharks. They're not killing them for the food. They're killing them to be able to protect their babies and young. And so I think orcas did the same thing with megalodons. Now, in his question, 10 orcas versus a megalodon, you're still talking about a gigantic shark. He's not mindless. Megalodons were very successful. Hey, they caught mammals, right? They have to have some sort of intellect. And so I think that 10 orcas would be too much for a megalodon. Megalodons are so big, they can't turn their bodies very quickly. They have to turn kind of slowly. It's like turning a big cruise ship. You can't just turn it sharp. But orcas can change directions very quickly, and that means that they would be able to probably do coordinated attacks. Now, Megalodon has an advantage, and that is it doesn't have to come up for air. The orcas keep having to surface for air. But I would still think 10 would probably be too much. I think they would just simply be too much. Okay, this is from Navian No, who says Allosaurus versus two Ceratosaurus versus Albertosaurus. Wow. Well, Allosaurus is my favorite dinosaur. I think an Allosaurus could take two Ceratosauruses. I think they could. I think Allosaurus would be able to dispatch those two. But unfortunately, with them being gone, that leaves Albertosaurus and Allosaurus. And unfortunately for me, Albertosaurus is a late Cretaceous dinosaur, much more advanced. The dinosaurs towards the end are more advanced than the early dinosaurs. So that I would have to give it to them. I hate to say that because I love Allosaurus, but I would hate to say that. Okay, let's see. This is from Jurassic James, who's only 4, says Titanus versus Titanoboa. This is a very interesting one. Titanus is the terror bird. Titanoboa is the giant constrictor. The bird is way faster than Titanoboa. And it could do, if any of you live in the southwest part of the United States, we have a bird called a roadrunner. And the roadrunner kills rattlesnakes. Even though the rattlesnake is venomous, the roadrunner is so fast, it just attacks the head, attacks, and jumps back every time the snake strikes. Well, I would suspect that Titanus would be able to do the same thing. Now, listen. If Titanoboa ever gets its coils around it, that's the end of that. There is no hope for Titanus. But I think Titanus might be quick enough to be able to dodge the incoming strike and respond by repeated attacks of the skull. I'm going to give this one to Titanus, I think. I'm going to give it to Titanus. I think it's just a great question. Let's see. And then there is, let's see, let me find one more here. This is interesting. Wow, this is interesting. This is Seth, who's 5 years old from Swansea, UK. Would like to know, hey, this is interesting. Woolly mammoth versus Dinotherium. Wow. Dinotherium is bigger. Dinotherium has the downward pointing tusks. Woolly mammoths are actually relatively small. Which I know amazes people, but they really are. They're not very big elephants. They're about the size of an Asian elephant. So woolly mammoths are pretty small. Dinotherium's a big dude. I would give that particular fight. I think I'd give that fight to Dinotherium simply because it's so much bigger. All right, my friends, I hope you all like this particular podcast. It's different because we didn't talk about one particular dinosaur. If you liked it, I hope that you will leave a comment on the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group page and tell me if you liked it or not. And if you did, then maybe I can do one on predators, maybe talking about hunting methods, and I will divide them up by little, medium, and small, and little, medium, and large predators, and maybe talk about their methods of hunting, or what I thought their methods of hunting were. For everybody out there, be kind to your friends, be nice to your family, tell your parents you love them, tell all your family you love them. If you see somebody who doesn't seem to have friends, try to be that person that at least tries to be their friend. Maybe some people don't want friends, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people like being alone. But like if somebody is new to your school and they don't know anybody, that's very tough. That's a hard thing. So step up and be kind. Tell them, hey, I like dinosaurs. Do you? And if they say yes, tell them, well, then you need to listen to the Dinosaur George Kids podcast. To everybody out there, thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Remember, what was the date? I will be at my store at Traders Village on April the 20th, 2024. Come see me and introduce yourself, and I'll give you a shout out on a podcast. Take care, you guys. Be good, everybody, and I'll see you.
Thank you for listening to Dinosaur George Kids. Join the Dinosaur George Kids Facebook group, become a member of our Patreon club, and check out our website store for cool fossils, rocks, and crystals. Visit dinosaurgeorge.com for details. Until next time, keep digging for knowledge.